Today, I am going to share about my miscarriage story. Being that we're in October and it is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, I thought it was important. If you are interested in hearing my story and my experience, please stick around. This story starts in September of 2005. It was September 6th, and I was going for a regular doctor checkup. I was 21 years old. No biggie, just trying to get checked up. And the doctor was like, well, you're pregnant. And I don't remember if it was the urine test or a blood test. And I was a little shocked. I was like, oh, wow, okay. Like, it was a pleasant surprise. And so at the time, I think that same day I went home and I got my husband a card. And it said, something about dad, and I gave it to him, and he was also pleasantly surprised. We were just not expecting it. And I can't remember if at the time I knew that I had PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. I can't recall, but it was a pleasant surprise anyway. So maybe that weekend or the following week, we were at his family's house and we announced that we were expecting. Interestingly enough, for my family, I got my parents a grandparent card. And I don't know why, but I was 21, I was already married, living out of the house, and I was so shy about telling them myself. So I told my sister to give them the card. This was so weird looking back. And she walked out there, gave them the card, and I was waiting around the hallway, and they were happy too. So it was great. And I just remember from the time I found out September 6th, I was making plans. We had family from out of the country that was oh my gosh, what are you going to want to do for the theme? And I remember the theme was going to be little frogs. I really liked them. And I had found a nursery set. I already knew what I wanted. It was great. Super excited. So I knew I always wanted kids. So for me, it was a dream come true. And then that was September 6th, the day I found out. So the following couple weeks, we were announcing and telling people. Well, then on September 29th, I woke up and I was bleeding. So I was scared. I don't even know that I knew what that meant. I was just something's off. So I woke up my husband. So we drove to the hospital. And it was 20 minutes away. And there, pretty scary. 2 young kids. We didn't know what to expect. And they took me to the back to do a sonogram, an ultrasound, a vaginal ultrasound. And I remember feeling scared that he couldn't come with me or they didn't let him. I mean, we were just whatever it takes. So they took us back. And I remember looking at the ceiling, the tiles, those tiles that are white with black dots or holes, and just staring as they were searching and trying to find the baby. Now, I remember when on September 6th, they didn't tell me how far along I was. They were just you're pregnant. And I was waiting for my first follow-up. So when they were doing the ultrasound at the hospital, they were looking at how the sac didn't develop. They found out that I was 12 or 13 weeks. I was very far along, but that the sac didn't develop past a certain week. I don't know. And they said, well, there's nothing we can do for you here. So you're going to go home and you can pass it on your own. What does that even mean? I didn't know. And I was okay. So we went home. And every bump on the road was painful. At this point, I feel I was experiencing labor. What I know now is labor, because after 3 kids, it's painful. So we get home, we lived on the 3rd floor, and I do my best to get up there. I mean, I'm uncomfortable. And so we make it up to the 3rd floor, and I just throw myself on my bed. And I slept, or I tried to sleep. And I think I did. And then I just felt I needed to use the restroom. So I went to the restroom, and I was, again, what I feel now was labor. The breath was being sucked out of me. I didn't have much energy. And all of a sudden, I felt something drop into the cervix. It was really weird. It just kind of like came down, and then I felt it come out. And immediately I just felt like a breath of fresh air. I felt like every time I've had my other kids, how it feels right after they come out. So I'm in pain. I feel like I'm dying. And then as soon as they come out, I'm just like, oh, like a breath of fresh air. I'm breathing. I'm alive. That's how I felt. Um, and it was just different. And so, of course, I was bleeding, and I think I showered, and I, put a pad on, and I just rested. And then, because they wanted to follow up with me if something didn't happen that day, to come back. So I did. They checked me out. I did not have to have a DNC where they clean you out. I had just naturally, I guess, cleaned out myself. But it was scary just because they didn't really explain much. And I remember at the time, I was telling my husband in the hospital, like, are you okay? And he was like, I'm okay if you're okay. And I was like, yeah. We felt at the time that we were spiritually strong. So at the time, I was emotionally well. Emotionally, it wasn't, I feel like it wasn't hard. We felt okay. We were like, okay, things happen, it's okay. I don't know mentally like what that does to you, because what I realize is that years later, I'll hear something on the radio now. And this is what, 14 years, in 2005. And sometimes it'll make me tear up just thinking about, wow. I didn't expect this. Just thinking about that little baby. But like I said, at the time, emotionally, I was okay. I just said, you know what, it happens. Things happen like this. We don't know what life is going to throw our way. Maybe this is how I rationalized, maybe hard times were going to come our way, and they did. But I don't know why things happen. And so I thought, you know what, it just wasn't the right time. So we were okay. But like I said, years later, I'll hear something on the radio or somebody talking about, a miscarriage and losing a child. And it does get me now. So it's harder now. At the time, I still always say physically it was more painful than emotional at the time. But I think as years go on, and maybe because I have my other 3 children, it's a little harder to think of what that baby would have been like, and we've shared it with our oldest, and he often asks us about that baby, and I wonder what it was. And I remember off the bat, I thought it was a girl, or at least I had a name for the girl. And it was Morgan Jimena, and Jimena is like a Spanish name, and I would have spelt it with an X. And I always say I like exotic letters, so X and Z definitely is in my book. And so I don't know. I often wonder who was that baby, what was that baby. But anyway, that was, like I said, that was really just something that we experienced. And it was, I had friends who were young who had babies prior to that, around that time, at 21, that's pretty young. And I just remember thinking like, wow, I didn't think that was going to happen. Like, you don't, when you're expecting or pregnant, you just don't think that's going to happen. Nobody does, I think. And so it was a shocker that I'm like, oh no. And at that point it was like, is something wrong with me? What's wrong? And I don't know, it could have been the PCOS. I don't know what it was. I remember the doctor saying like, it's not your fault. A lot of moms can sometimes blame themselves for different things. I know that to not be true. Like, what I'm saying is it isn't our fault. Things happen and they just do. But yeah, and subsequently, obviously for the others, it's nerve-wracking. I think in general, people always, they wait for the 12 weeks to announce, or they're nervous. even with our first, with Nathan, I was nervous, tried to be relaxed because that's what they tell you to do. But I think for all of them, there's always that little bit of fear. Is something going to happen? Because you never know. It could happen at any time. So anyway, that's my story. If you're still here, thank you for sticking around. I appreciate each and every one of you guys who've subscribed to the channel. I enjoy sharing my stories just to look back on, as I've said many times before. Sometimes we forget, and it's nice to go back and see, like, what have we been through and what did we get through. Details are forgotten, and they're important to just remember your journey, and that to help others too. Maybe somebody's out there experiencing the same thing, experiencing the first time around. And so there's nothing wrong with having hope, no matter what the situation is. And so if you are out there and this has happened to you, or you're experiencing this, don't lose hope. It's very easy to do that, but you don't know what tomorrow brings, as I didn't either, and I didn't expect to be sitting here with 3 other children. So just hold on to that hope. Thanks again for being here, and thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.